I mean, lots of incredible statistics that are very worrying. Is this what's prompted you to take this action, Chris?
I think we've seen these statistics grow and grow and grow. In the last week, we've heard that insect populations are in critical decline all around the world, here in the UK as well. They've impacted on our wildlife. We've seen 97% declines in hedgehogs since the 1950s, 90% decline in our water voles. We've seen turtle doves go down by 95%. These are all in the 90s. These are species that are on the brink of the extinction in the UK. And we've been doing good practical conservation here to try and bring them back, but not rapidly enough and not broadly enough. And on top of that, we've got something which is pretty insidious when everything's becoming rare, and that's wildlife crime. And up until this point, there hasn't been a single body which is going to address this issue. So let's be very clear here. We're after wildlife criminals, and unfortunately, they're still out there in the UK countryside, persecuting birds of prey, illegally hunting foxes, hunting hares, and these sorts of things. And we're also going to challenge the laws that are in place to make sure that they're robust enough to protect our wildlife in the 21st century. And there's no doubt that some of them need upgrading, updating, and they need changing so that the police and others can implement them and see justice done in the courts.
Chris, you say that there's no single body that does this, but of course there is the National Wildlife Crime Unit, which is the Home Office and DEFRA directly fund. They provide intelligence and support for local police forces to tackle these sorts of crimes you're talking about. They get £300,000 funding per annum towards the end of 2019-20. I'm sure you would say that's nowhere near enough. But there is a unit that is trying to do this.
Yeah, they try and they do great work, and we are there to support them. So we're taking more the legal side. They're going to be out in the field, catching the criminals, getting the evidence and taking the cases to court. But we're working with a crack team of lawyers from all over the UK who are going to specialise in making sure that when these cases get to court, they get the proper representation and then justice is implemented. Too often, when these wildlife crime officers and others have worked terribly hard to catch these criminals, they get into the courts, and unfortunately, the judiciary, the magistrates aren't really aware of the gravity of these crimes which are taking place, or the laws aren't robust enough to secure prosecutions. And we want to change that. We want to make sure we get the prosecutions, and when the justice is dealt out, it's not meaningless. I mean, if a Scottish gamekeeper illegally kills a golden eagle, from my perspective, that's robbing us of a national treasure, no different than me walking into the Tate Gallery and slashing a John Constable painting. We've got to make sure that people understand the gravity of these crimes, and the criminal fraternity are focused upon so that we can weed this out. We're doing a great job of protecting species like golden eagle, but unfortunately they're still illegally persecuted, and we aim to put an end to that sort of practice in the UK before it's too late.
Fascinating. And one of the other stories that's been talked about a lot this week is the concern over insects generally and the decimation of them, and even suggestions that UK is presiding over a kind of ecological disaster if we don't do something about insects.
Well, insects are fundamental in the food chain, as you appreciate. You know, so many things eat them, other insects and then birds and then mammals, so they are intrinsically important. And we've seen populations of these animals collapsing. I mean, we're talking about 75% losses. These have been measured very accurately in Germany and France. This week it was Puerto Rico, but also here in the UK. And we've seen the evidence of those collapses. Our farmland birds, which are dependent upon these when they're feeding their young at other times of year, have dramatically declined. There are a range of reasons for this. Climate change is definitely playing a role. We see changes in our butterfly populations, which have suffered as a result of that. Development and loss of habitat. But one of the key driving forces here is the overuse of pesticides in the environment. And we know that there are a lot of really good farmers out there that have minimised the use of their pesticides, or they've cut them out altogether if they're organic. But there are still large areas of the UK where enormous quantities of these poisons are being put down, and they're having a negative effect on our wildlife population. So we want to work with these people to try and minimise this impact, but as rapidly as possible. animal. This is a very serious situation.
We just thought we'd get your thoughts, Chris, while we have you. There's so many things we love to talk to you about when you come on, but we're just having a debate about all the students going on protest on Friday about climate change. You're talking about the changing environments and habitats for these animals. The extraordinary pictures that came out of the Russian town, Belusha Gubya, I think is the name of the town, in the Arctic, where dozens of polar bears suddenly stormed the town because they're freezing there, a habitat is changing.
These bears are spending more time ashore, and as a consequence of that, they're getting hungrier and hungrier, and it's this that's driving them into towns to look for food, in this case into rubbish dumps. We've seen this in Canada happening before, and of course the people there then have to learn how to manage these animals in a peaceful way. In Russia, they're protected. You can't kill polar bears, thankfully. But these sorts of issues will undoubtedly increase as we see climate change really punching in. And having listened to the previous report, there was one thing I'd like to say, and that is with absolute clarity, I salute all of those children who are going to walk out of school on account of climate change. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, have given the world leaders 12 years to make a difference. And since that ultimatum was delivered in the latter part of last year, I've heard nothing from our world leaders about doing something about climate change. They are not helping humanity. And these young people are going to draw attention to this issue because their generations are the ones that are going to suffer more than ours. So I salute every single last one of them. And I don't see this as a waste of school time. I see this as a dramatic opportunity to say to the world, wake up and listen, because you are asking for a desperate, desperate situation to get worse. So I sincerely hope that it's a successful day for these young people.
They will be delighted to have your support, undoubtedly,
Chris Packham supports me on their placard, I think, because that is a definite vote of confidence.
Chris, thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's always good to catch up with you.
Yeah,
You're most welcome.